So how have all these trips been in life just in general since having a kid?
It's been, I mean, in some ways, it's like a little bit. It's definitely a little bit different because you're leaving,
Yeah.
and then you're always, you're thinking about like, and then you come back, and you're like, I wonder if my baby's even gonna recognize me. It's like
Yeah.
these weird thoughts of like, but then I get home, she's super excited to see me or whatever. But yeah, it's just, you think about it a little bit more
Yeah.
in some of those times where it used to just be like, oh, I'll leave for however long, and now you're like, okay, when it was time to go home, I was ready to go home.
Yeah. A
So
little more targeted with
yeah,
like what you're doing and why.
exactly. Yeah,
And how old is she now?
just 10 months.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a fun age.
yeah,
Super fun. And my assumption is with like you and your brand Live Wild that like living this wild lifestyle is a little deeper to you than just hunting. Is that accurate? Like
oh,
what it
definitely.
actually like does for you as a man and like what it means for you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's like one of those things. I kind of encompass everything of like, I don't know why I've always the kind of gravitated toward that saying of like live wild, but it's more just like it's not just going out and hunting. It's like living a life where it's not the same every day. It's
Yeah.
like you don't know what's going to happen. You're going to encounter. I mean, in some ways, it's like I don't know. I think as men, we kind of need some element of danger. We need some
Mm-hmm.
element of unpredictability. We need some element that like tests ourselves.
Yep.
And it's like in that test, like that's, you kind of feel like I feel alive in many ways. Cause there's a lot of hunts that I go on and, it's like, I mean, I've been on a lot of hunts and those hunts that just are kind of easy. And you're like, that was pretty much a cakewalk. Those aren't the ones that really speak to me. Those aren't the ones that I remember, but it's the ones where it's like, man, we grinded. We almost didn't like, dude, we had to go over this pass. Like this crazy stuff happened. It was,
Mm-hmm.
those are the ones that like those moments that kind of stick with you. And that's kind of the thing that it's just, yeah, every part of my life revolves around that hunt and those experiences. And then even just bringing it back at home when it's like most people go to the store and buy their food. We're eating the things that me and my wife harvest ourselves. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, like it's kind of all encompassing for us of like
Yeah.
this wild lifestyle that maybe, not everybody gets to experience, but I think in some ways, some people get to, even if it's just for a short period of time for a short hunt or a weekend or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, getting that kind of aspect of, being out there and living off the land and testing your skills against nature and
Yeah.
seeing how things work out.
Yeah. Adventure teaches us so much. It's
Does.
crazy. Just like you're out there, you got to figure it out.
Yeah.
No one's there to back you up.
Yeah. That's what I've always loved about just going out by myself. And it's like I have done some really long solo trips in some places and even back before there wasn't the GPS units and there
Mm-hmm.
wasn't cell phones. And it's like I would just go out for 2, 3 weeks, stuff on my back, and
Yeah.
if I didn't make it back, no one would know.
Yeah.
Like no one knew where I was, and I didn't even know where I was half the time. But in those experiences, I learned a lot and really learned to trust my own skills and develop a skill set that I think no one could teach you and no one could take away from you. And which
Mm-hmm.
I think it's probably something that I'm outside of like my family and other things is most prideful about is like
Yeah.
went through the hard yards and the paces to develop skills that maybe a lot of people don't have
Yeah.
or didn't put in the time to that are very valuable skills, and that's one of the things that's like I feel very fortunate to have
Mm-hmm.
those skills. And so that's kind of one of the things I like to teach other people of the things that I've learned because I feel very fortunate to get to spend so much time doing the things that I love that not everybody gets to do that. So that's kind of why I like to do the teaching people
Mm-hmm.
hunting techniques and things that I've learned over the years. It's like so when they get to go out, maybe they can glean a little bit of something that makes them more successful or makes their experience better or more
Yeah.
enjoyable.
Yeah. And it seems like we need it more now than maybe ever before, especially if you look at like men and you look at the COVID issues that we had over the last 2 years, just that like men need the adventure, they need the mental toughness, they need to be able to plan and prepare and navigate through emergencies. And the way that backcountry hunting teaches you all of those three major skills is crazy.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you're pretty self-reliant because there's not a lot of like easy buttons to hit.
Yeah.
You just kind of gotta go through it. And I think that's actually a lot of it too. Is being in situations where you can't just take the easy way out.
Mhm.
Because people are, I've always thought this, like, people can do so much more than they know they can do. I've seen, like, as a professional guide, you get to take a large different group of people out,
Yep.
and I've seen guys that are in really good shape that go to the gym every day
Mhm.
and young and every whatever, but they just don't have it in here and they
Yeah.
just don't know what they can do, right? And then
Yep.
there might be their dad with them who's just like a salty whatever, and
Yeah.
it's like in half the shape in whatever, and that guy will outwork the guy who by all means can do 10 times what the other person can do,
Yeah.
but they just don't know how to push their limits or haven't been in situations where they just haven't had any, like they maybe have just taken easier options out
Mhm.
and they just don't have it up here to just say like keep going or not think about it or whatever.
The mental
The mental
toughness. Yeah,
toughness.
it's
Yeah, it's
crazy.
crazy. How like it's insane how much that gets you, how far that
Yeah.
can get some people.
When did it start for you, do you think? Like, what was your childhood like?
I think like uh I mean I kind of hunting was my thing. I was absolutely 100% obsessed with it. Like
Mhm.
in the as much as you could be obsessed with anything, that was me in hunting. Like I didn't even think about anything else. And I think a lot of it came from me when is like my parents were really cool about seeing that I really loved to hunt and letting me do it, but also they couldn't like people couldn't be hunt as much as I wanted to hunt, so I had to go out and like hunt by myself. I remember in the state of Nevada where I grew up, I think legally you had to be 14 years old or something to hunt by yourself, and you get like a permission slip or
Crazy.
13 or something like that. And so I was like, I remember when I turned that age, I was so stoked because I was like, cool, now
I
I can
go
hunt
alone.
all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they were like, okay, cool. They dropped me off and let me go hunting alone, and like
Crazy.
and you're like, okay, I think about it now and I like meet like
Yeah.
13-year-olds and I was like, there's no way I would let that kid
Yeah.
go out alone with a gun. But my parents just were like, yeah, drop me off or maybe me and a friend off.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, it's like, just hunting kind of locally and stuff. But I that was pretty cool. And then as I got older, doing like it was just I was loved to hunt so much, I would do it as much as I could, and that meant a lot of it hunting by myself.
Yep.
Um, being out there, like, and then I started doing more backpacking style hunting, and then just like I just could never get enough. I would just go and I would like stay out till if I had a tag that the season was 30 days, and that was like my hunt, I would hunt every day.
All 30.
Oh yeah, I
Yeah.
wouldn't I wouldn't fill it. I'd just be like, okay, I want to know every deer in this area. I want to just stay out here, and then the last day I'll shoot something. You know what I mean? And it was
Yeah.
easy to because you knew everything that was going on by that point.
Crazy.
Yeah, I was just like very obsessed with it, and I think, but through it, taught myself a lot of valuable skills and um, yeah, learned a lot of cool things along the way.
Was your dad a hunter?
Yeah, he was. Yep. My dad was a hunter. His dad was a hunter. I mean, I started, like, there's a picture of me and my mom's like holding me. I'm like probably under a year old, and they're like in a wall tent, like out
Yeah.
on an elk hunt in a backpack.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so I kind of like taking that into, my daughter, my wife and I, we take her out, we travel with her a lot, and just like it's just part of life when you
Yep.
grow up with it. And I know a lot of people, I feel very fortunate that that's how I was brought up.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of hunters are that way, but there are a lot of hunters that don't know anybody that hunts and getting into it later in life,
I
and I
know.
could see like that. It's like, man, I don't remember a time where I didn't hunt
Yeah.
essentially, or didn't go out and do those things, fishing, hunting,
Yep.
camping, that kind of stuff. um, there's no memories of not doing that,
Just a
right?
lifestyle.
Yeah, but I could see that like it seems like it would be something very difficult to get into if you didn't grow up in that way.
Yeah. And you're helping a lot of first timers, just encouraging them and kind of supporting them to like come out west and hunt for the first time.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think part of it is just um, there's well, there's so much information now, but
Yeah.
there was a point. I mean, I remember a point where it's like these things that I was doing, I felt like I was doing something that nobody knew about. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? In
Yeah.
many ways, like, and to me, that felt very adventurous and very like, but it was also took a lot of legwork, took a lot of research, took a lot of this and a lot of that. And there wasn't a lot of people doing it because there wasn't any information. Now there's a lot of information, and a lot of the things that maybe weren't accessible to people even 10 years ago are now easily accessible by just Google searching something and
Yeah.
like at least figuring things out to the point where you can get enough information to get started, and
Mhm.
I think that takes a lot of the fear out of it. Of like, I don't know how to get into that, but
Yeah.
when you have that information available, and I like to be able to provide that information for people of at least just encouraging them. This is something that you can do. It's not impossible, and here's the steps to do it.
Yeah. And it potentially could change your life.
Yeah, absolutely,
I mean, the passion, the purpose, the adventure can easily change someone's life.
definitely.
When do you think the mental toughness side of hunting was something you started paying attention to? Or do you think you were just like so driven from an early age that it was just more natural for you?
No, I mean, I kind of remember a specific point that changed like the way that I thought about things because growing up, there was always, I mean, not that we always hunted really hard and everything, but we weren't as successful as I became later on. And I think one thing is like, you would think about things like, oh, how are we going to get an elk out of here? Or, like you would set these like limitations, right?
Mhm.
And it seems like a random way of this coming about, but I was driving. I can't remember. I was on a road trip somewhere, and I used like book on tape back when they were like on tape, so
Yeah.
actually CDs, book on CD, and I got the Lewis and Clark.
Undaunted courage.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. And so it was like is essentially a storytelling of their
The
journeys and what they
journal.
did, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm listening to this, and it's like these dudes were in essentially wool, like very uncomfortable clothing with whatever, and they're carrying this boat 20 miles a day, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, and they're in areas, they were going, through the trail and a lot of the areas in Idaho, Montana, whatever. I was like, I've been on some of these places,
Yeah.
and I really like it. Just clicked in something in my brain. Is like, if those guys could do it then with very limited resource and whatever, I was like, I should be able to do. Like, there should be no. I should never set a limit in my
No
mind of what is
limits.
too far,
Yeah.
because I was like, it for some reason that just clicked in my head of like telling me, okay, it's just like there's nothing too far. Like, I mean, good, there's no reason that I should ever have the word too far. And I
Mhm.
started hunting with that mentality of like nothing was too far. I would just keep going and going and going and figure it out. And it was
Yeah.
like because I started doing that, I realized that there wasn't any. It was just an all like a mental limit that kind of limited me to be like, oh, let's only go 3 miles. Let's only go 5 miles.
Yeah.
And once I started doing that, it was like my success increased, what I learned increased, the places I went increased, and the ability to do those things. It was like it actually never really was as difficult as like you would think it in your head. You're like, oh
Yeah.
yeah. I was like, it's pretty hard to reach a limit where you absolutely can't go anymore. It's like
Yeah.
very impossible almost because
Oh, yeah.
you like it's all up here.
Yeah.
And once I realized that, is like it completely changed the way I did things.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
That book's so good
it
too.
is.
Like those buckskin pants they were wearing.
Yeah.
Like they were eating like 9 pounds of meat a day because they had no vegetables. And
Yeah.
that book is so phenomenal.
Yeah, and you're like, man, there's so many people that did so many tough things, and I'm like, you just got me thinking. I was like, you can do it.
Yeah.
Like we are all humans. We just somehow became like pussies in some
Yeah.
way. Like
Yeah.
there's just something happened between then and now that it's like, oh no, we don't do those kind of things anymore. And that just like flipped the switch in my head. It was like, why not?
Yeah.
Right? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what it was about that. It's just like maybe it's something of like hearing of the things that people can do,
Mhm.
because I think that kind of stuff maybe doesn't get talked enough or shared enough or whatever. And you're like, wow, there really is no limit to what I can do if I just do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a famous line in that book. I can't remember if it's Lewis or Clark, but it's pretty remarkable. He's on his birthday and he's in the tent and he's like super depressed and he writes this really famous one-liner and essentially he says, I'm turning 30 today and I can't believe how little I've done with my life.
Right.
And he's like about to discover Oregon for the first time ever in history. And it's like so crazy, like that he's super bummed, like he hasn't done anything, and he
Yeah.
just like discovered the West for the first time.
Yeah, it's a pretty crazy story, really. Like
Yeah,
the whole thing. Yeah,
yeah.
but that kind of mindset is just like, yeah, I think he was kind of like of that mindset of like, ah, nothing's too much.
Hmm. One thing we see a lot, so like the Mountain Tough Lab is the headquarters where we test everything, and so it's kind of cool now because for about 6 years we've been studying mental toughness. And one of the things that I've recognized that I would say if there's one thing that all mentally tough people have, like one trait, to me it seems like they never view failure as failure. It's always just learning. And you kind of just talked about it a little bit, like there's always like a chance to learn and then try again and learn and then try again, and that you really can't fail if you're always just learning and then adapting and then doing it differently the next time. Is that kind of what you're seeing in terms of like that helps you be a better hunter and also with the folks you're guiding as well?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I know like a lot of the things that I've done, I think like a lot of the things that I've learned have become from just trial and error.
Hmm.
It's like, a lot of things I didn't have anybody be able to show me anything, but it wasn't even like, yeah, I never came back from a hunt thinking like, oh man, I was unsuccessful. I was like, every hunt I've ever been on, whether I killed something or not, it's been a successful hunt because
Yeah.
I should have learned something on it, and
Hmm.
every experience is different. And the more you do it, sometimes, things start to kind of like be like, okay, well, you start finding these patterns and these things and these better ways of doing it. And then you can do it your entire life and
Hmm.
find the best way of doing it. And then it's also going to not work out sometimes. Right. But it's like, okay, well, what went wrong in that scenario? Why? And then just constantly, continually adapting and then changing and finding those ways to do things better and just kind of like continually progressing because yeah, I don't know if I've never had that idea of anything failing. It's like even when things go to complete shit, it's
Hmm.
not failing to me. It's just like part of the adventure. It's
Yeah.
like there's times where it actually, I think some people get stressed out. It's like, oh, things are going bad. This sucks. And I'm like, well, no, this is just part of like, why we're out here, what's
Yeah.
going on in
Yeah.
many ways.
Are you seeing that during guide season where like guys might beat themselves up on a failure point and like
Yo,
go into a negative cycle?
oh yeah, I know. It's like one thing that I always think about is, where kind of where your head's at is where you go. Like I see it too. Like think about it like a hunt or whatever, and it's like a week where there's very few animals or like a low density area, or maybe they're just like it's a good area, but you don't see much, right?
Mhm.
And you're like you aren't seeing anything, so you go like, oh man, this hunt sucks. You start saying like this hunt sucks.
Yep.
You're like, okay, well, what happens when you start saying something sucks? Well, you start thinking negative about it, right? And you're like, there's no deer or elk in this area.
Mhm.
Okay, there's no deer or elk in this area. And then what is your action after that? Well, you're treating it like there's nothing there. So when it's time to glass, right? You're looking around like this. And then you're like, "Ah, there's no elk. It's like not even worth looking." And it's like, oh, well, I could climb over that ridge, but we looked there yesterday. There's nothing there. Oh, God, this sucks. And then you get distracted and you start doing other things, right? And then exactly what you're thinking happens because, yeah, in your mind it sucks and you aren't treating it like anything could happen. That elk or deer could be just around the corner. Oh, if it's bad, then I need to hunt harder,
Yep.
right? You actually like do the exact opposite
Opposite.
and you make whatever you're thinking essentially come true in many
Yep.
ways because it's like, okay, you could get lucky, but you aren't putting in the same like work as like when I go into an area, if I've never been in there or whatever, I've got like this way of tricking my brain of saying like, I am going to find a 200-inch buck in this canyon.
Yep.
And I am going to like, and when I think that it's like, if I told you there's a 200-inch buck in this particular canyon,
You're gonna find
and I
it.
was like, it's in there and he hasn't left. And
Yep.
you're like, dude, this buck is in here. I'm glassing, I'm climbing every knob. I'm going to be up 2 hours before sunup. I'm going to hunt till dark. I'm going to just grind because I know it's there.
Yep.
And like when I go in with that mentality, it's like I actually find that kind of success because I'm hunting like that success is there. And
Yep.
sometimes I'll do that and I won't see, it's like, well, it didn't happen. But I still like in some ways trick myself of saying like, no, it's there because I want to be there, like giving it my best every
Yep.
time. And when you start getting that like negative mindset, that negative mentality, you don't give it your best. It's impossible to.
Yep.
Like everybody gets down. Like I've had I was in BC this last year, and it was like we weren't seeing anything. It was like it was that. It was in some ways like it was a dream hunt that I wanted to go on my entire life, and it was not working out.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it just wasn't. But every day I got up and was like, all right, and I got to trick myself because they could be around this next corner. I gotta, you know what I mean? I
Yeah.
gotta do what it takes up here to hunt like it's gonna happen,
Yeah.
not like it's not gonna happen.
Those mental tricks are so big.
You have to.
Oh yeah, they're huge. We see it in the gym all the time too. Like one super awesome mental trick for it works well for hunting too, but is like a really nasty hard workout you'll run someone through, and you'll see them start going into like that negative cycle where they're like, oh, this is too hard, I'm not feeling it today, this is crushing me. But if you can get that person to do the mental trick of like, this really isn't that hard, as soon as you think like this really isn't that bad, then everything gets like 70% easier. And it's like the same thing on the mountain. Like if you're just getting crushed like by a nasty climb, it's like really isn't that bad. And like changing that perspective changes the whole game.
For sure. Yeah, I get it. I see it happen with like even when you get bad weather or something like that. One thing that we see is like people like really high wind, right? Like when it's windy and stormy and shitty, like people are like, it's terrible out. I'm like, okay, you think when the wind's really blowing, right? Like 50, 60 miles an hour. And you think about it, like I always just be like, yeah, it's like driving down the highway and rolling down the window. That's not that bad. You know what I mean? Like you like, okay, because I see people as like, oh, it's horrible weather out. Like we aren't whatever. We aren't gonna see anything. We aren't gonna go out. It's like, oh, we go rain, shine, whatever. And I see that was like, okay, you just change your perspective on it. Yeah, it's a 60-mile-an-hour wind. That's a heavy wind. Or it's just driving down the highway with your window down.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That
Like that's
perspective.
you don't freak out when you're driving down the highway with your window down, right?
Yeah.
It's like it's just normal.
Yeah.
You stick your hand out the window, it's nice. It's like, oh, this is a great thing.
Yeah.
Right. But when it's like a storm coming in or high winds or whatever, people tend to like get in this space that like actually freaks people out. And they just don't know how to handle like small things like that in some ways.
Yeah, it's actually a well written about mental toughness trait. It's called pessimistic optimism. And you'll see, like, obviously you have it. You just basically verbalized it very well. But all mentally tough people usually will have pessimistic optimism. And so we joke about it because, like, really mentally tough people, sometimes you think they're like on happy pills in the mountains. You're like, why is this guy so happy in the middle of a blizzard? Or why is this guy so happy when it's -20? And it's that mental trick of like, it's -20, but at least it's not -30. And it's like blowing 60 miles an hour, but at least it's not blowing 70 miles an hour. Like as soon as you just like flip that switch, it's like, oh, it's not that bad.
Yeah.
Could be way worse.
Could be way worse. Yeah. It can always be worse.
Yeah. When we talked to Jack Carr a couple weeks ago, we asked him about buds because like everyone wants to know how different folks pass buds and like any sort of tips or tricks. And he went right to that perspective change. He's like, I just imagined that I was on the beaches in Normandy and I was actually on the beach of San Diego, and no one was shooting at me. So he's like, it was super easy as soon as I just flipped that switch.
Yeah.
It's super cool.
That's cool.
So how has mental toughness gone related to you and your guiding? I was super curious around, what do you do when you see someone like that you're guiding start to bonk or start to crash or go in that negative mental space? Are there any tricks you have to kind of like rejuvenate that person?
Yeah, that's what I know. It's like, I remember when I first started guiding, I was pretty young, and I'd be like, I was probably like 18, 19, probably 19, 20 years old, you know? And I'd be like taking these guys in the mountains and they're relying on me. And these are like guys that are probably in their 50s, 60s that, you know, have extremely successful in business, millionaires, right? And then you just watch them like completely fall apart and you have to be like their psychologist, you know? And I'm like, well, I've only been alive for 19 years, but let me tell you how to live, bud, you know?
You got this.
Yeah, I was like, man, dude, you just, yeah, this isn't working out for you. This whole life thing, you know, got it figured out yet, have you?
Yeah.
And I think part of it was like, you know, sometimes just like, I think when people, like kind of in some ways keeping an optimistic, in some ways also like goes back to that pessimistic optimism, but like
Yeah.
keeping that optimistic thing of like dude, we're out here to hunt. You know what I mean? You maybe missed that shot,
Yeah.
but like we aren't gonna get another shot if you're hunting like we aren't gonna get another shot.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've actually had like some experiences where people maybe they think that like in some ways they've like bit off more than they could chew, but they just didn't know like at the time. Like people that get up on the mountain and they get afraid of the mountain, they just like freak out. Like,
Mhm.
oh my god, this is I've had people freak out on like this is so steep. Why would you take me? You're trying to kill me. What's going on? Like just like in some ways like
Fear.
just yeah, just
Yeah.
like freaking out. Sit them down and be like, look, you aren't gonna fall off the mountain. I mean, like it's the mountain.
Yeah.
It's steep,
Yeah.
but you aren't gonna fall off. Like we do this all the time. This is how we do these things. Like we aren't trying to be a dick.
Yeah.
We're just trying to like do what
Get
we
you in the
normally
right
do, and you're
spot.
making it really hard for me to do my job, what you hired me to do.
Mhm.
Kind of like relating to him, like, look, you aren't the only person here, right?
Yeah.
You messed up. Think about what I'm going through here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In some ways, and sometimes, like, actually, a lot of times, that snaps people out of it in a weird way of like, dude, we're in this together, man.
Mhm.
Like I'm here. It's like, yeah, okay, whatever. It sucks for you, but like, how much would it suck for me if you've got a bad attitude?
Yeah.
Would you want me to have a bad attitude this whole time? And a lot of times people don't even think about it. They're just so in their own head about what they're doing. They don't realize like, now we're in this together,
Mhm.
like, and when you've got a shitty attitude, it makes it hard for me to do my job and make this thing work out in
Yeah.
some ways. And I think sometimes that just snaps people out of it.
That's awesome.
I don't know. That's just kind of one of the things that I've kind of come across as like really humanize it to them, like,
Yeah.
because they just get so in their own head that it's like they forget about everything else, like all the cool stuff that happened, all the whatever. They forget about like whatever. And then one thing that I say a lot that sometimes I think that resonates with people is like the difference between the best day hunting and the worst day is literally 1 second.
Yeah.
Many times we're just looking for that next 1 second. It's like that's how fast it is. So if you think about like you're on a hunt and maybe you missed an opportunity of what maybe someone would consider an opportunity of a lifetime. You missed your shot or
Mhm.
whatever. And I'm like, yeah, but that hunt, right? It was super exciting. And all the way up until that point that you missed, it was the best hunt you've ever had, right? It was the coolest experience, the best thing that you've ever had. And then one little second went wrong.
Mhm.
And then we've got, so let's be stoked on that up to that one point, and then we're going to go find that other 1 second.
Yeah.
We just got to keep going and keep getting after it to get to that one little thing to go right.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's about like encouraging them to get up off the floor and react to the
Yep.
hit they just took.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I mean these are things that like you got to do to yourself too sometimes, because like I've said it before. In some ways, it's like I think mentally tough people is that you think of it like people think of it like, oh, well, that's just their personality, right? And it's not my personality. Like my
Mhm.
personality, I'm not the most optimistic, right? It's not like
Yeah.
I just wake up every morning and be like, oh, let's do a little dance, But it's a thing that's like you choose that path every day. I like to think of like I choose my thoughts
Mhm.
and just having like that self control of being like, okay, naturally, maybe I might actually be like a naturally pessimistic person.
Mhm.
But instead of like going down that, I just choose, like, I'm choosing to do it this way.
Mhm.
And I think that like people don't sometimes understand those two things. So they'll be like, oh, well, it's easy for you because this and that. It's like, no, it's not easy for anyone.
Yeah.
But it's like something that you train yourself to do. It's something that you do through repetition. It's something that you do because it's like that's what you need to do. And you're gonna,
Mhm.
and, I found like it's very successful in other things. But I think sometimes people they get down and they're like, oh, I'm just the type of person that when bad things happen, I get this certain way. And I was like, well, I think a lot of people are like that.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, maybe there's people out there that are just always riding the high horse, but
Mhm.
for the most part, it's like something that you choose that you have to like you actually have to practice doing. You have to condition yourself just like anything else. It's like you
Yep.
aren't going to go out and run a marathon just because you want to. You
Mhm.
got to train and condition for it. And the same thing with like being mentally tough. You got to keep telling yourself those things, playing those tricks.
Yeah.
like working on the way that you look at things and the way that you do things, because otherwise you go down that other route and then you end up, not succeeding and seeing that failure as a failure and then keep going this way as opposed to this way.
Yeah. Yeah, mental toughness definitely seems to be exactly like a muscle. So if like folks aren't training it, then it's not going to stick around forever and it is going to go away.
Yeah.
And then it's going to get stronger and stronger if you train it just like a muscle. And that's why we see a lot of like you'll see a ton of special operations guys that obviously are extremely mentally tough and then they'll get out and they just never stop pushing themselves. So like they'll be out but they're still like skydiving, driving cars, like going on crazy hunts cuz like they want to keep challenging that adversity level over and over again so
Yeah.
that like it doesn't go away.
Yeah.
It's
I can see
awesome.
that.
So what's new with the Live Wild podcast?
Yeah. I mean, it's got, so we got, essentially it's the way that I do it is I like to kind of combine stories as well as, tips and tactics. So kind of like breaking everything down, hunting, most all pretty much hunting tactics and things. And I like to tell stories because I think it's in some ways entertaining, but also I found actually doing like the solo hunter show and other things, the message that I got the most was like, whoa, watching that, I've learned so much. And I was like, learned? Like it was just, we were just like going out. And it's like the little things that I don't think about, I
Mhm.
think come across better in a story. Because when you're just telling a story, you aren't really noticing all the little nuances of things that maybe you do. You're just telling like what you did. And then
Mhm.
other people are like, oh, I didn't think about that. Or, oh, next time I'll try that. Or, oh, dude, that didn't really work out for him either. But,
Yeah.
maybe it worked out this way.
Yeah.
And so I like being able to tell that story and share the story, and then going into like diving into like a higher level of tips and tactics of things that I've learned and like ways that you can kind of do things to maybe find more success when you're out hunting.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I've been very fortunate to put in a lot of time out in the wild, and like before I was married, and I think my longest stretch was in 1 year was 323 days of
Crazy.
like, that's between guiding and everything. It was just like, so I essentially, the days that weren't, I was just traveling to a new place or
Yeah.
whatever, and whether it be scouting or hunting or fishing or just like being out there. And it's just like years of doing that. You learn things that I think maybe some people might not learn. And then
Mhm.
there's other people that, do what I do. And we found that like, I like talking to those kind of people because it's like it's kind of funny. You like tend to find people that do things the same way that you came up on your own,
Yeah.
and they came up on their own, and it's like we do things exactly the same. It's like maybe that's just the simplest way, you know what I mean? Like the
Yeah.
simplest way to do this certain task. And it's like you only maybe find those things out just by doing it over and over and other things not working and these things start to work and you
Yeah.
just come to this like conclusion.
Yeah.
And that's something that I enjoy seeing is like, okay, I've put in a lot of time to be able to kind of dissect some of this stuff. And so if you don't have the time to put in, well, you get the benefit of learning from the things that maybe have taken me, those quote unquote failures, about 10,000 of those to get to
Mhm.
this point where it's like, all right, if you do it this way, it's probably going to work out better for you. And maybe it will, maybe it won't, but at least I think that it overall gets to help people in that
Yeah.
time that they do get to spend and enjoy that time a little bit more, maybe find more success and kind of cut that curve of having to go through, things that maybe you'd never pick up and learn that, you could kind of bypass some of that stuff and find more success a little bit easier.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I think that storytelling teaches a lot of those like micro tricks and tips where it's
Yeah,
like just small little incremental tip after tip seem to make the biggest differences. It's not like some giant trick that's going to change your hunting life. It's like hundreds of baby tips that are going to make you a better hunter.
for sure. Yeah, it's all those little things that, might be doing whatever. Tell a story of like chasing red deer in Argentina over here and then chasing elk over here and deer over here. And maybe there's one thing that I don't even notice that I'm doing in those things, or a way that, every scenario is so different too. So within hunting stories, that's one thing I love about hunting is like, I remember as a kid, it's like hunters would get together and we would like, I think that's as long as hunting's been around, hunting stories have
Stories.
been around. Like
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
on cave walls. People gathered, hunters gathered, and they told their hunting stories. And there's a reason for that. It's like, I think that reason is because that's how they learned and that's how they shared adventure and that's how they communicated with each other. But also I remember being a kid and listening to some of the older guys like tell hunting stories and like thinking like, oh, I want that, or being out there and them saying like, oh, this happened, and then having something similar happen and react and like knowing how to react just through a story that I remember hearing, you know, when I was like 12 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I think there's something cool about it.
Oh yeah, they're so helpful. Just like our elders' experiences and like what they saw and
Yeah.
like different calls and stuff they use at different times that you never even think about.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah. And it's like, I don't know, those when all those stories are bouncing around in your head and then you're in these different scenarios, then you kind of have like I don't know, just this way of, okay, I'm gonna try this, or this way of maybe even just not even thinking about it, just reacting. And it tends to work out better for you. And then sometimes there's stories where somebody's told me like they did something and then you end up doing the same exact thing and
Yeah.
it doesn't work out, whatever. But at least like there's that basis for it, that base for it.
Yeah. One of the interesting things with Mountain Tough now is we hear from a lot of folks that'll be like it'll be like a busy working professional from, let's say, the East Coast, and they'll be like a 40-year-old man with like 2 kids that has never hunted out west before, and it's like their aspiration to just hunt out west one time. And it is pretty crazy because my childhood was a lot like yours, just like living outside 24/7 in Montana since I was 8. And so when we hear these kinds of stories, it's always interesting to me, but we hear a lot of like that 40-year-old busy professional, 2 kids, very like bored and sometimes struggling with the like heavy computer digital lifestyle they're living in with like not much adversity at work. But like very scared to come out west for the first time and like kind of hunt on their own for the first time. What do you usually say to like those folks to encourage them a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, that's, I think in some ways, like through guiding and then even just through the things that I do, people reaching out. One thing that I've noticed is like a lot of people that fall into that category, the one thing once they do it, they always say, I could have done this sooner. And you know what I mean? Like once you've done it, you realize like you can do it.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing of like, but until you do it, it's very unknown. It's just like anything, it's like once you've done something once, you're a little more familiar with it. And I think part of it is kind of just like, just actually getting out and doing it. And it doesn't even have to be, one of the things that I even suggest to people is like, it doesn't have to be like, don't think about it of just doing it once. Do something once just to know that like you can do it. And then you can do it at least plan it for twice. You know what I mean? Like, because once you do it that one time, it takes that fear away from it. It takes that like mystery out of it. It's like, oh, this is something that I can do. This is something that's normal, whatever. It might be difficult, it might be whatever, but you can do it. And I think that once that switch flips in your head, that you can do it, then it's like, okay, it's not that scary. It's not that daunting. It's not that impossible. But it's just like taking that first step of doing it. I don't know. There's a lot of people that are like, hey man, I want to do this. It's something I really want to do, but like, I just don't know. And my thing is like, well, just get an antelope tag and go out and drive around and like, just get
start.
here, just start. You know what I mean? Find the easiest thing it is to do, because once you do that, you're going to be like, oh yeah, I can do this. Like it just kind of takes that like fear and mystery out of it in some ways.
Yeah. Just start somewhere.
Yep.
Yeah. We say the same thing a lot. Like it doesn't have to be the 14-day backcountry elk hunt the first time. Like there are tons of little micro trips you can start with, and they don't even have to be out west.
Yeah.
Like just start doing some cool, harder things in your own backyard.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I look and there's a lot of places across the country that I think are probably pretty underutilized by people that are like, oh, well, we got to go here and go there. And I'm like actually looking, I'm like, I'm going to
Just
where
cross
everybody,
paths.
yeah, it's like, well, you're coming here, I'll go there. Because
Yeah.
there is a lot of cool stuff around that people, um, don't think about. And, just getting out and doing something like that makes all the difference.
Yep. So what trips you got on the radar for this year?
Yeah, actually, I'm going to be going to New Zealand here pretty shortly, and looking forward to that. Gonna take my wife and baby are coming. Baby's going with. We're gonna take her in the backpack, take her out hunting and stuff, and
Crazy.
yeah, and that'll be really fun. I'm really looking forward to that. And then Western big game hunting is kind of my bread and butter. And as the season starts to progress, be I've got some general tags that I'm looking forward to hunting, and then you never know what you might draw to. So I apply for a lot of things in a lot of
Yeah.
places, and then I'll be doing some guiding as well. So got pretty much I'm gonna be kind of on the run for the next till the end of the year essentially, but really looking forward to a few things. And you never know, there might be something that's like big game draws and whatever. You could just
Yeah.
might hit the jackpot one of these days and,
Yep.
and get something that like wasn't expecting. So you never know.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And did your wife grow up hunting?
She didn't. I wouldn't say she grew up hunting. Her dad hunted, but he never really took her hunting. And then I think it was just something like we started dating. It was like, well, I eat wild game, so and I'd cook it in ways that she's like, this is really good. And then she just kind of wanted it. She's like, I never really pushed her to go. It's just something she wanted to do. She actually, her and a friend like just went and they did their hunter safety on their own. Like I didn't. I was like, she's like, I got my hunter safety. I can go hunting. And I was like, cool. She's like, I love eating the food. I know that you love it. She's like, and she liked fishing, and she's like, I really want to go hunting. And now it's funny, like she went from not hunting to like
All
loving it.
in.
Yeah, yeah, I think is she definitely loves it, and it's something that we get to do together too, which I think is
Mhm.
really cool. And now having a daughter, it's really cool to like be able to do it like as a family, and
Yeah.
it's kind of even shifted. I think certain things change as you go through life too. Yeah. So it's like, yeah, certain things change as you go through life. Like, first starting out when I was younger, it was like all just about hardcore backpack, doing the hard things no one else could do. And then now it's like kind of shifting to this thing. It's like, well, they don't like all have to be those kind of adventures. There can
Yep.
be these adventures of like where, we're just, I'm bringing somebody new into it. I'm enjoying it with my family. Like every
Mhm.
hunt's so different. There's so many different reasons to love it and enjoy it in different ways. I think I was
Yep.
very singularly focused early on in my life of like this is the kind of hunt that I do and this is all that I
Yep.
enjoy.
Yep.
And now I'm finding like enjoyment in a little bit different things and doing different things.
Yep.
Things change, and not that I still don't do all those other hunts and enjoy them, but I also almost enjoy like cruising around with my daughter in the truck, like looking for antelope, and like
Yep.
she's not even old enough to like really get it, but I can see like when she starts being a part of that process, like that's probably where my focus is going to go for a little while, and
Yeah.
doing those kind of things. It's really cool.
Yeah, I'm going through the exact same thing right now with just that like maturity point. I think I have two daughters, and so now, especially this time of year with shed hunting, it used to be like go, 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 all for like backcountry elk, winter range, shed hunting trips every
Yeah.
weekend. And now it's like, no, we're just gonna like hit the local river bottoms for whitetail sheds with my daughters, and it's like the best thing ever. It's
Yeah.
so
That's
awesome.
cool. That's
Yeah, to
awesome.
like to see them get excited and then to see them be outside and like going through the elements and going through like the struggles of shed hunting and then like that like joy when they find one on their own.
That's
Like,
super cool.
it's so awesome. Yeah,
That's really cool.
it's
I
really
can't wait
cool.
for that. That's
Y-
going to be fun.
Yeah, it's awesome.
That's cool.
Um, Wrapping up, can you tell us about your risk? Because I think before you share the story, I think it's a pretty awesome example of like mental toughness because it's like mentally tough people they know hits are coming and they just are going to adapt and evolve and move on with life regardless of like what happens. And I think your wrist is a pretty good example of that, especially with your hunt coming up soon.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess essentially had, I mean, in some ways, I don't actually even know what happened. I think, well, it definitely started doing stupid stuff, but and like a lifetime of abuse.
Yeah.
But yeah, I essentially had to have like everything rebuilt. They took the tendons out of my forearm and opened it up on both sides, and then screwed through, and then wrapped some new tendons and screwed it to the bone. And I mean, I just got the cast off a couple weeks right before Argentina. I had them cut the cast off, and yeah, I've got, limited mobility in it, and can't actually like pull weight with my bow or anything
Hmm.
yet. So I'm just learning to do the mouth tab thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it's just one of those things. It's like, you could see it as a setback and be like, oh, well, there goes my bow hunting. There goes my this, there goes my that. It's like, well, it's not always like that. It's just a perspective of like, I love every kind of challenge. And whether it's filming my own hunts, whether it's, picking up a long bow or a self bow or a recurve, or bow hunting, or picking up a rifle tag and going into an area with really low densities. It doesn't really matter. Like, I love those challenges.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's just like, oh, cool. I get to do something I haven't got to do before. And, it's going to be fun. It's going to be new. It's exciting. And so it's one of those things. It's like, yeah, you want it to be fixed. Like, I think a lot of people are like, yeah, you just want it. It's like, however many months of rehab and whatever to get it back going,
Yeah.
instead of seeing like what it can't do. I'm like, well, there's a lot of other things, new things that I can do.
It's going to work around
Yeah,
this.
exactly. Find a workaround, and excited about doing it.
How was shooting the mouth tab for the first time?
Interesting, to say the least. But yeah, it's not too bad. Like, I think I'll be pretty accurate with it. I think I'm going to pick it up pretty quick. It's like one of those things. I kind of see myself as something like, you do so many of those, like, shot ever, you shoot all the time, you do all these things. It's like the mechanics are there.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like, it's like, if I've said this before, but it's like, if spoon hunting were legal, that's what I would do. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't really matter what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like, I've done it so long that, like, you can kind of pick it up and adjust and do whatever.
Adjust
your
your
I don't
weapon.
really think about it. I just like do it, I
Yeah.
guess. And that's, I think, a good way to be. Like, there's a lot of people like that. And then some people say, oh, well, you just see it as a setback. I'm just like, yeah, we'll just figure it out. I don't even think it's like, yeah, it's just another way to hunt.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of people that, that this is a temporary situation for me. There's a lot of people that it's a permanent situation,
Mhm.
and I think that, just like part of it probably for them is, just getting that, like, just starting.
Mhm.
And I definitely know a lot of people that, shoot with a mouth tab all the time. And like, I
Yeah.
actually have always thought, like, that's really cool. And it looks very difficult. And I think it's one of those things, like, it seems difficult, but once you start doing it, it's absolutely doable.
Yeah.
It's like,
That's awesome.
I might find that it's like, that's my preferred way to shoot. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not far enough along, but yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, you might stick with it.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, hey, at least I can scratch my nose and shoot at the same time. So it'll be something new.
And you'll try it in New Zealand.
Yep. Yeah, I'll try it there, and go on some hunts. And yeah, I'm sure and it's cool too, because it's like, there's going to be new things that I'm going to learn of, like, okay, I've hunted this certain way, and that when I'm down, I draw back this way, and I do these things, and like, oh, maybe I can't do that.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't even know what kind of things I'm going to encounter. So I'm actually excited about it. It's like a new way to hunt and something new to do, and I like doing that. Like, trying to switch things up all the time. And,
Mhm.
in my core, like, I like to think of myself as a bow hunter, but in my core, I'm like a hunter. I will hunt with anything.
Yeah.
It's like, I hunt all the bird seasons. I hunt all the big game seasons. It's like, from rifle to muzzleloader to archery to traditional archery to whatever. I don't care.
Doesn't matter.
No, I just like to get out and just go hunting.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate it, man. We'll let you get back to your 10-month-old daughter and
thanks.
family, and thanks so much for the opportunity.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's been awesome to be able to sit down with you guys and have a chat.
Thanks, Remi.
Yeah, thanks.